Each of us has an inner critic. It's that voice in your head that's always judging and criticizing. It's always pointing out your flaws and failures, your mistakes and misdeeds, your imperfections and shortcomings. It's always looking for ways to invalidate you. It's the reason you might feel insecure or inadequate. It's the reason that you might back down from doing the things that you feel inspired to do, or why you might give up so easily. It might be the reason that you're unhappy, because it's always telling you that you're not good enough in some way or another. And if you observe this voice, if you really examine it, what you'll tend to find is that it's really the voice of others. It might be the voice of your parents, or your peers, or the voice of society. In other words, these judgments and criticisms aren't even your own. This inner critic consists of judgments and opinions that you've heard throughout your life from various other people, that you have believed and adopted as if they're your own. And it's worth taking some time to question those beliefs, to examine them in order to negate their validity. The problem for many of us is that we've never done this. We simply assumed that these things are true without ever taking any time to investigate. When the thought arises in your mind that you're worthless, for example, or it could be something else, but when that thought arises, we tend to just accept it as if it's a fact. But it's not a fact. It's a judgment. It's an opinion. And it's probably not even your own opinion. It's probably something that someone else said about you, and you believed it without question. So it's worth taking time to question these beliefs, these opinions, these judgments. And it begins by, first of all, recognizing that they're not facts. So when this kind of thought shows up, you know immediately this is not a fact. This is an opinion, which means it's not necessarily true. And if you can just see that, you don't have to believe it. It's only when we believe these things that they affect us so deeply. But what I want to offer you today is a simple way to discard or dismiss the inner critic whenever it shows up. And what I want to offer you is a simple way of questioning this inner critic in order to silence it. And it involves questions such as, is this useful? Is this helpful? Or is this even necessary? So when this inner critic tells you that you aren't good enough, and that's probably the most common negative thought that shows up for most of us in some form or another. It might not always be worded in exactly that way, but the essential message is that in some way or another, you aren't enough. Or the thought might be that you're a failure, or that you never do anything right, or whatever it happens to be. So when this thought shows up, we simply ask, is this thought useful? In what way does this thought help me? Does it have any practical value? Can I apply it in such a way as to improve my life, to improve myself or my situation? In other words, what is the use of such a thought? We might think of our inner critic as if it's a separate entity, not literally, but in some way it does seem to behave like a separate entity which lives with us, which follows us everywhere we go, always looking over our shoulder, analyzing everything we do, and constantly criticizing and complaining. And all we're doing is investigating whether or not its statements and opinions are useful. And if we find that it isn't useful, if we find that it isn't helpful, if it's not providing some valuable advice that you can use to better yourself or your life or to solve a problem, then why listen? Why dwell on what it has to say if it's not saying anything useful? Why do we give any importance at all to what it says if what it says is not important? For something to be important, it has to have value. And for something to have value, it has to provide some benefit. So what benefit do these thoughts provide? If they provide no benefit, then they have no value. And if they have no value, then they're not important. And if we can see that they're not important, then we can simply disregard them. The problem is that we give these thoughts too much importance. We give that voice too much of our attention, and that's what feeds it. If we took no interest, it would be like taking away its food source. If it were a person who was saying these things to you rather than just a voice in your head, would you give them the same attention? Or would you, at the very least, dispute what they were saying? If you lived with someone who was constantly complaining and criticizing, you might get to a point where you're fed up with it. You might tell them, I don't care what you think. I don't value your opinions. You never have anything of value to offer. All you do is criticize and complain, but you never offer any solutions. You don't have anything useful to say. You don't have any useful suggestions or advice. All you have is useless opinions. And I'm no longer interested in your useless opinions. Or what if you just ignored them? What if you just didn't respond at all? How long would they go on rambling? If you didn't respond to someone, would they go on rambling? Maybe for a little while, but eventually they would give up because they're not getting your attention. Even if you live with someone who is always complaining and criticizing, if you don't respond, if you take no interest in what they're saying, they tend not to go on rambling. And even if they do, you can just let them ramble to themselves. You don't have to engage. You don't have to respond. You don't have to show any interest. And if you don't put any value in what they're saying, it has no power over you. It doesn't have to affect you in any way. They can say whatever they want, but if you don't value their opinion, it doesn't really matter what they say. If we approach our inner critic like this, it will tend to quiet down. It may not go away immediately or entirely, but it will tend not to disturb you so often. And when it does show up from time to time, we just keep asking the same questions. We keep asking, what is the use of this statement? Is it useful at all? Does it offer us something of value? Is it giving us some practical advice or a solution to a problem? Or is it just a useless and unnecessary opinion? Because if it's not offering anything useful or helpful, then why give it any of our attention? Let me put it like this. What if you decided that you were only going to entertain thoughts which were useful, and any thought which is not useful or helpful, which serves no practical function, which does not contribute to an enhanced quality of life, you simply discard those thoughts. You just don't give it your attention, because what would be the point? At the same time, we also need to foster a supportive voice, a voice of compassion, a voice of encouragement. That even when we make a mistake or when we fail at something, there is a voice that reminds us of our inherent value, which reminds us of the things that we've accomplished or overcome, which emphasizes our best qualities and capabilities, which offers us comfort and consoles us, a voice that encourages us to get back up and try again. And that we give our attention to that voice instead, to the voice that uplifts and empowers us, which sees the best in us, which sees all of our potential and encourages us to embody that potential. And even when we fall short of that, it doesn't condemn us for it. Rather, it embraces us with love and compassion, no matter what the circumstances happen to be. And this voice, which we could call the inner advocate, if we give voice to that, if we feed that voice with our attention, not only will it feed us in return, but it will fight on our behalf. So that when the inner critic arises in us, our inner advocate will rise up to defend us and to silence the inner critic. If you find value in this content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.